Alright, so hello everyone, welcome to your very first Meteor tutorial. In this course, we'll be covering the basics of Meteor. So we'll be creating a to-do app. And this to-do app will cover everything from Meteor methods, publications, using GraphQL, publishing the program, all of that. So if you're interested, feel free to follow along. This course will be beginner friendly. So the requirements for this course would be that you at least know a little bit of React and React hooks, as well as some Node.js. And if you do know a little bit about GraphQL, then that would be perfect, but GraphQL isn't a requirement. So if you ever do fall behind, there is a GitHub repo where you can go and get the code we worked on that lesson. Just click on it and you copy the code. So it's weebnetsu and octocotuts. Other than that, we will be working from the Meteor tutorial documentation. To get there, you can go to the Meteor website, so meteor.com, and you can just scroll all the way down. And right here where it says tutorials under open source, it should direct you to this page where it says to do app. You can say start tutorial and choose your language, React, Blaze, Angular, Vue, or Svelte. Currently we'll be using React, so I'm going to choose that. And here we go. We'll be following this tutorial right here. So we can go to creating the app. And here we want to install a few things. I do recommend that you do have VS Code already installed. If you don't want to use VS Code, it's perfectly fine. You can get a different IDE or text editor to do the job. But the reason I recommend VS Code is because it is an IDE and it does have an integrated terminal right here, as you can see here. If you're on Linux or Mac OS, then you can just copy this and paste it into the terminal by going here and just clicking paste. And whoops, you won't get that problem. You'll see this. And then executing it. If you already have Meteor installed and you want to reinstall it, this is a great way to do it as well. I've already done it, so if we go back here, as you can see, mine is already installed. It took a while, but it's done. If you're on Windows, then you need to install Meteor by npm. If you don't have npm, then you need to go and install Node.js, which will install npm for you, and then you can just copy this and paste it into your terminal. Great, so now we can get started. We want to create a simple Meteor project. So to do that, I'm going to open up my file manager. And I'm just going to resize it so we can all see. And here in documents, you can create it wherever you want. I'm going to be in documents. I'm going to say new folder, and I'm going to call it a simple to-do tuts. You can go inside of it, and if you're on Linux, you can just right click and say open in terminal. If you're not on Linux, however, you probably are using your terminal or your command prompt. If you're on Windows, to open up the command prompt, you can just press Windows key and R and type in CMD, or you can search for CMD. On Mac, you should also be able to open up the terminal from the file manager. If not, you could probably search it up as well. But I'm going to do it from here just to make it easy for everyone that's following along. So you can say CD, which just means change directory. So this will move you from one folder to the next. Currently, if I show you here, I am currently here. This is my home directory, my home folder. I want to go to documents. So that means I'll have to type documents here. By pressing tab, it will autocomplete for me. Now that I'm inside of documents, so just press enter and you'll see you actually moved to documents. Then you can press CD again. Now that we're inside of document, we can go here to simple to do tuts. So yet again, type simple and just press tab, and that should also complete it for you. Now we're inside of this folder right here. Great. Now we need to create our first Meteor app. So Meteor create and dot. Also take note, this folder right here should not contain capital letters or spaces, just to be on the safe side. So I'd stick with going lowercase and dashes. But if you make sure everything is correct, then right here you can just say Meteor create and then just put a period here, and that will mean create a Meteor application in this folder. If you press enter, it will start to create the application for you, and you can just sit back and relax, and it should only take a few minutes. Meteor has finished installing the project for me, so we can now get ready to continue with the tutorial. If we go back here to my file manager, then here is the simple to-dos application. This is what everything was installed. We have a package JSON, which is just basic Node.js. We have node modules, which also is just Node.js. And here we have the client. The client is basically where all of our code gets injected to. All the code we write will go into main.jsx, and main.jsx will paste our code or compile the code and everything into main.html. We wouldn't really be working inside the client's folder except for the main.css. So these two you can just leave them as is. Then we have an imports, and here's our API and UI. API is to work with databases and communication, whilst the UI is for the user interface. So this will be how everything looks, and it will be the front end of our application. Then we have our server, which is just the back end, so it's just a server. And then we have a test folder, which we won't really be using a lot. Great, so once you have all of this, we can then close out this and go back into documents where our folder is, and we can just drag and drop this into VS Code. VS Code will then load the folder for us. And as you can see, everything is rather the same. So if we go back here, then we have a client. So there's the client, we have an imports, we have a node modules, we have a server, we have a tests, we have a package and a package log JSON. This .meteor file, we can get that by saying show hidden files, and there we go, .meteor and .getignore. Great. Now if you have confirmed that everything works and is perfectly fine, then we can get started. Now in here you want to open up a new terminal, so go to terminal, new terminal, and you'll notice that it opens up exactly where you are. And that's what's so great about VS Code. It opened up this terminal inside your project folder. I'm going to resize this a little bit. Then down here, we can just say Meteor run. But it's also perfectly fine to just say Meteor as well. So it's your choice whether you want to say Meteor or Meteor run. I usually prefer to just stick with Meteor. Run that, and this will start up your Meteor application, and then we can see it once this has completed. One of the nice things about Meteor is that it will keep your app in sync. So once you make a change in one of your files, Meteor will automatically refresh the page and update everything on it. While we wait for that, we can open up our first folder. So we can go to imports, and then UI, and we can just open up our app.jsx. If you don't know where we got this file, if we go back here, then as you can see, we have our imports, our UI, and then our app.jsx right here. So we've already got a basic application built out for us. Here we have a welcome to Meteor, and then we have an hello and an info. We can look through them just to give you an example of what's going on here. So here we have a basic counter, and it increments every time we press this button. And we will see this in action within a second once this right here completes. We also have an info.jsx, and this here pulls some data from the API because there's already a links collection in our database, which Meteor has automatically created for us as a template. Then here it finds all of the data using useTracker, which we will talk about later during the tutorial. And here it says learn Meteor, and then it prints out all of the links it can find. If you want to know where the links come from, it will be inside of server and then main.js. Inside here, you will find that there are a few links. So if you scroll down, as you can see here, it inserts a link, and this insert link is just this function right here, which just inserts that data into a database. And it just inserts the link, and then info.jsx gets those links from the database and displays them. And here we go. So here's our location where we want to go. I'm going to just copy this. So don't press Control C, but just copy this and then say copy. Then you can go here to your browser and you can paste it and it will go to that website. Your local host is a server that your PC runs. So you can go here at any time and this website will pop up if the server is running. Currently my server stopped running, so I'll have to wait until it's back up again. Then here we go. So here's the button that was inside of hello.jsx. So if I say click me, then this will increase. Basic React application. Instead of info.jsx, we printed out all of the links. So here we go. So one thing I do want to change inside of the client, inside of main.html, is this title right here. I want to call it my to-do app. And there we go. And as you can see, Meteor automatically refreshes the website for you, and there we go, my to-do app. Our first order of business would be to remove these two right here. So we can remove those components and we can delete the files they came with. So this hello.jsx, we can say delete. If you don't feel comfortable deleting this inside of VS Code, then it would be perfectly fine to open up your file manager and go here and just delete hello.jsx and info.jsx. And you'll see them being deleted right here as well. Then here, if we save this app.jsx, then here it should update to show that those components no longer exist. And here we go. It no longer shows those extra components. It just says, welcome to Meteor. We'll now be creating our first component. So go to UI and say new file. If you don't feel safe creating a new file here, you can always go back to your file manager and just create a new file here. I'm going to do it inside of VS Code, however, because I find it to be a bit faster. Then here we can call this task.jsx. And now we have this file right here. I'm going to create a template for a React application. And here we go. This is a basic React component. It just imports React, creates the component by creating a function. So it's a functional component. And in here, it returns this div that just says hello world. And then we export it down here. Instead of app.jsx, we want to import that to make sure it works. So here I'm going to say import, and I want to import task from, and here we want to import it from this folder. So we need to add a dot and a slash. and then say task. VS Code automatically recognized that this was inside of the same directory and auto-completed it for us. If we don't add this right here, this dot and slash, it will think that we are trying to find it from the node modules folder, which is right here. That is why React is here, because React is inside of the node modules folder. So as you can see here, there is React. So we need to use this dot slash to reference that this is from this folder. Then down here, we can actually use the component. And there we go. Meteor even updated to show us hello world. Now you can go back to task.jsx, and I'm going to just close this right here, just to give myself a bit more space, and just drag this down. Then up here we want to access the props. Currently we can just say props, and then here we can create a list element. So I'm just going to go here and say li. I'm going to remove the div because we won't need it for this current example. And in here, I want to pass in something into this component, and it's going to be a task. So here we want to render out that task. So I'm going to use curly brackets, and I'm going to say props.task.text. So we'll go to the props, and it will ask, hey, is there a task prop here? And then props will reply yes or no. If there is a task prop, it's going to ask, hey, is there a text property in this task? And it's going to say yes or no. If there is, it's going to return that text. Great. Then here in app.jsx, we can say task. And just as an example, we can say title Jack. And this will have to be covered in another amount of curly braces. Save that. And this should be text, not title. Now if you save it, you should see this right here, Jack. So currently, when we go here, we're calling an li. So this is just rendering out a list element. We don't want to render out a list element. We want to enwrap that list element inside of an unordered list element. So a ul. This is just for good practice sake, since you usually wrap an li inside of a ul or ol. Do that. Not much will change except for the fact that we're using a better practice now. You might also notice if you go back here to task.jsx that saying props.something.something can be quite tedious. We can break this down right inside of here, and we can just add more brackets and say task. So this will say, okay, in props, do we receive a task property? So we no longer have to say props, we can just say task.text. If you save this, everything here should look just the same as it was. So let's create some dummy tasks. We'll later on make this read from the database and then use the database instead. So here I have a piece of code which is just a dummy database. It's a variable, constant variable called tasks, and it just contains an ID and a text. And it's inside of an array. To make sure it works, we can go here and say tasks and just pass in an index, because this is inside of an array. So this would be the first index, and this would be the second, and this would be the third, or actually 0, 1, 2. Save that, and we should see first task pop up right here. So this means we're on the right path. So what we can do now is we can map through this. We can use a loop and go through all of this and pass it into task. So what we can do is we can go here and create curly braces to say that we're going to write some JavaScript code. We're going to say tasks.map. Map is a special function that allows us to loop through an entire array. So saying map would be the same as saying for let I is equal to 0, and while I is less than tasks.length I plus plus. It would be almost the same as saying this, and then giving us what is returned with tasks. So inside of map, we can open up our bracket and we say task and create an arrow function. So this task is just to give this value a name that we're going to use, because currently we don't have a name we're going to use here. We just get a value back and we don't know how to access that value, and this will allow us to access that value by accessing task. So while it's on this first loop, this will be known as task. So task is equal to that. Then in here we can call our task component again. I'm just going to copy this because why not? We already have it. Paste it there, and now I can modify it. So first, here where it says tasks at index 0, we can just say task, because this task will then be passed into here. This is a property, so this property is not the same as these two variables right here. Save this, and you should see all of your tasks. But you will notice that if you were to open up the console, so you click here and just say inspect, and go to console, you will get an error, or a warning instead. And this just means that if we go here, we need to add a key. Because if we want to access this task here again, we will need to give it a key so we know which task we want to access again. So we can do that by just saying key is equal to, and here we can just pass in task._id. So we're accessing this underscore ID and making that this key. Save this, and then if everything reloads, so let's just reload the entire page. As you can see here, there are no more errors or warnings. But you will notice that if we were to just open up here and simulate a mobile view, that it doesn't really look that great. We can't really see the text, everything looks a little bit out of size. And this isn't the browser, this is our HTML. So if we go and open up our file manager here on this side, then you can go to client and just to main.html. And inside of the head, above or below the title, it does not matter, you can just paste this line of code. So what this means is set the char set to UTF-8, make it compatible, make sure the viewport is set correctly, which will fix this a bit better, then allow this to be available on mobile web apps, on both normal devices and Apple devices. So if we save this, then if we just wait for this to refresh, then everything has scaled properly. We can then close this main.html because we won't be using it for a while. So one more thing before we go. We also want to see errors appear inside of our web browser and not just here. So currently, if we want to do that, we have to stop this server, and then we can say Meteor add and then dev error overlay. And this is built into Meteor, where you can just say Meteor add and remove, and then a package that you want to add or remove. And in this case, this package will allow us to see the errors in our web browser and not just in our terminal. And there you go, it was added. Now we can just try to run the application again to make sure everything works. While we wait for that, if you're having any trouble following along, then I will repeat myself and just say that there is a GitHub account that has all of the code for you. So all of the code we do here can be found here. So this first one right here will be number 1. The next one will be number 2, and the one after that will be number 3, all the way until number 8. So if you're ever stuck, just go to GitHub and copy yourself a piece of the code. My server has reloaded and everything still works perfectly fine. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all learned something new and will follow along in our future tutorials. And I'll see you all again in the next one.